You're an astronaut. I'm a lady with a rocket. Will you?
Hi, I am Haley Dreis. I am a singer-songwriter and violinist, guitar player in Los Angeles, California.
I know you started out doing classical music, right?
That's right.
So
Yes.
how did that start out, and then how did it merge with songwriting?
Yeah, it's a funny story because I totally didn't expect to write songs growing up. I started playing violin when I was 6 years old, and my mom enrolled me in like Suzuki violin classes, which is like a really specific method where you all it's all about technique and all kinds of stuff, and kind of went down this path of becoming potentially like a performing classical solo violinist or in an orchestra. And I went through like a high school program that was arts based and through college. And so my degree was in violin performance. But then I was like, naturally in college, you just meet all kinds of different people. And it's a great time, I feel like, to see try different things and see what's out there and see if you like stuff or don't. And it just happened that in my dorm, there was a guy friend who came into our dorm who played guitar, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to jam sometime?" And I thought that would be really cool to jam, but I just don't know how to do that. Yeah. And as a classical musician, it's like if you are used to following music on a page and reading off of sheet music, it's really intimidating to think like, oh my gosh, I'm going to just play random notes. Like, what's going on here? So that was sort of an adjustment. But once I did, I realized that by just jamming with him, we ended up writing a song.
Nice.
And I was like, this is so cool, like putting lyrics and music. And at the time, I was also going to different concerts and shows, mostly like pop rock stuff and classical music concerts, really everything, covering stuff for my newspaper in college. And so I'd been writing and writing and writing a lot from that context. And I guess when I went home from winter break, I reflected on all of this, like all of the experiences, and kind of put them together and realized like I started learning I realized I had to learn guitar.
Yeah.
Because in order to, play and write songs, you kind of have to have like chords, and it's hard to do that on violin. So as I was teaching myself guitar, I learned a new chord, and every time I learned a new chord, I would write a new song. That's kind of how it went.
Oh, nice, yeah.
Yeah, once you at least learn 4 chords, you're good.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, from there, actually the entire winter break, I wrote like my entire album, which sounds crazy, but it really wasn't. It just was like, nothing to do for like a month and a half. And every other day I would just kind of like come up with a different idea and trying something different. And it just so happened that there was a student on campus who needed a resume, aka an album, to take with him to Nashville. And I was like, ooh, can I be your like guinea pig? This is great.
Oh, wow.
And it just kind of happened that way.
You mentioned that like learning how to not just follow sheet music, how that was difficult. On the songwriting side of things, what sort of challenges did you face initially?
So actually from a similar perspective of like trying to improvise and jam on the spot, songwriting is, I feel, probably the same way. You start with a blank page. And so you really have to come up with things, your own ideas and your own creativity, which actually is what drew me to songwriting, I think, in the first place. It's like you tell your own story and you create things out of nothing. And I feel like that's a more exciting way to live and be inspired by music, personally speaking. And I think it's very simpler in that you're, especially in a co-write, it's a constant state of improv, and you're always trying to feed ideas off of each other. But at the same time, sometimes it's even better with someone else doing it with you. Getting to know songwriting was definitely more organic for me because I didn't like go to school for commercial music or anything. But yeah.
What sort of challenges are you facing now?
Yeah. I think the biggest hurdle at first was definitely writing and just getting in that practice of like finding my voice. And so obviously we're always struggling to find our current voice, because it always changes, like who we are as people always change. And so right now my current struggle, I guess I would say, or challenge, is just figuring out who I am right now and exploring that. When I was on tour, there was a point where I had played all the songs on my albums for so long that was part of my identity. And now it's like moving forward into, it'll be my 5th album, I guess, but it's going to be a storyline from my previous 2 albums. And I'm just trying to think like, okay, where am I right now? So it's actually a lot of that personal reflection and a lot of that type of work right now.
Can you just tell me a little bit about your experiences with being a woman in the music industry?
Yeah, this is obviously a great question. Not just because I think sharing challenges, is a bit of a relief to know that you can relate with other people about it, but I think it's important that in order to move towards equality, I think understanding like where those challenges start from is kind of, the first step. And so I say that meaning, I don't want to share, my struggles in the sense of like, oh, I'm so upset about this and this and this, but more so just shedding light on those things. It really was a struggle when I first started playing music, because all the bands in the area, I think I was in Columbia, South Carolina for school, and that was the first time I was sharing music. And I think I was like one of 2 female singer-songwriters. Extremely outnumbered by a bunch of dudes and bands, which was fun but also challenging. I think the biggest thing was standing up for myself at gigs. That was something I think I've heard your previous interviewer artists talk about, but it really is a big one. I don't know if you've seen the Mrs. Maisel show on
I've seen parts
Amazon.
of it, yeah.
It's so good. I love it because there's this one scene I felt like I could relate to so much. Not in the sense that it went down this way, but she was at the end of her gig. She's a comedian, and she finished her show, and she was asking for money at the end of the gig. And she did everything she could to try to get paid off of this show. And nothing worked until her husband had to come all the way to the venue to punch him in the face. Which was just so amusing to me, because it's sadly kind of true, but not always. Not always. But
And that's
in that
the 50s.
Sense, right, and that's the 50s, right? I'd like to think we come a little bit further, but I unfortunately hear that still happens. So I think being confident in who you are, and that you do have a strong place in the music, in the world, and more importantly, just being able to share your story and feeling confident in that is a challenge. I've also had gentlemen who will, actually this happens a lot, where gentlemen will think you don't know what you're talking about regarding gear or songwriting or music or topics in general, but I am also in the tech industry and face this as well, especially with computers and technology. And you'll just see the eye roll looking into the direction of some other guy and just reassuring you that that's actually the right answer.
Wow.
It's on one hand you get used to it, on the other hand, finding a way to call it out when it's appropriate is important too.
So how do you call it out usually?
Well, I think when it's happening to someone else, I guess it's more effective when someone else calls it out, like another gentleman, especially if another guy calls it out, not by necessarily reprimanding the other person, but saying, hey, what, giving credit for the woman who gave that idea, hey, actually what, Haley or Maggie said is valid. I really like what she had to say. I think what she says is really important. And so just kind of recognizing those things in a moment, or if you're in a situation where it is hostile or aggressive, saying something like, that's not okay that you said that. And just sticking up for yourself in whatever context makes sense, I think. Thankfully, haven't had to deal with too much regarding hostility and that kind of thing, but it's subtle.
What do you usually do when you're trying to write a song and you get stuck?
When I get stuck, the best thing for me to do is to stop. It depends, because if you're in a co-write, sometimes that's not really an option. And sometimes stopping isn't always the right answer. But for me, generally speaking, if I put it down and I go for a drive, or I go somewhere where my mind is off of the topic and I come back to it, I try to think about the perspective, or just like waking up in the morning with that like fresh kind of outlook and that look on the topic. Sometimes also doing some reading and exploring. Sometimes I'll like read other poems or other songs and see maybe how someone else said it, especially if it's like a metaphor that I'm trying to like create or invent or whatever it is, that's trying to say something different. Then I just want to see how other people are saying it, so I might not say it that way, but try to figure out how I'm going to say it in my own way. That I think helps.
I wanna